They do have some inhabitants, but these homes on Leopold Street in Derby haven't housed any people for years. They've been locked and bricked up, and with no sign of their owner willing to bring them back into use, the city councils recently bought them by force.
This is a major road, it's the inner ring road, so a lot of cars travel by and see it, and it gives the city a bad reputation. As a very last resort, in the case of the most problematic and derelict properties, where we've tried a voluntary solution with the owner over a prolonged period of time with no success, then we can use powers of compulsory purchase, as we have in this case.
Other councils, including Nottingham City, have used the same method to make empty houses available to those that need them.
Play with your cat every day.
People like Catherine Morris and her daughter Yelena, who've swapped a cramped and damp flat for a refurbished two-bed house.
People tend to think that just, there's two of you, or one parent, single parent and a child, that, a flat's adequate, but sometimes, the children get older and it's not. That many houses is ridiculous that they're empty and people actually need. That many houses is ridiculous that they're empty and people actually need them.
In Derby, there are about 4,000 empty properties. In Nottingham, the figure's more than 5,000, and in Leicester, the total's almost 6,000. But Catherine's landlord feels councils need to consider the interests of property owners as well as tenants, or face the consequences.
They're paying rates on them if they stood empty. If you're not careful, you're going to end up that they're going to be taking the roofs off them and knocking them down just to get out of paying rates.
And with the housing market slump showing no signs of slowing, it's feared the number of unsold homes left to lie empty could rise even further. Simon Hare, East Midlands Today, Derby.
Well, joining us now in the studio is Councillor Alan Clark, who's responsible for neighbourhood regeneration in Nottingham. Good evening. Thanks very much for coming in. I have to ask, is it right, really, to force somebody to sell their house if maybe they just don't want anybody in it or they can't sell it themselves?
I think those are interesting examples we saw from Derby, and I think the situation is very similar in Leicester and Nottingham, that there are some extreme cases where intervention is really important because the houses are deteriorating and it's causing a nuisance to neighbours.
We know it's getting harder and harder to sell properties in the current economic climate, so logically one would imagine there will be very many more properties which are, for whatever reason, left by their owners.
I think that's certainly true that the figures are going to be high at the moment. That's perhaps why we've got that 15,000 figure, because transactions are taking that much longer. But we've got a list where we're broadly looking at houses that have been over 6 months empty, and there's about 2,000 of those is the Nottingham figure.
Compulsory purchase is a sort of a bit of a stick. Is there a carrot that you can offer people as well who've got houses that don't have anybody in?
I think there's lots that councils are doing, as we heard in that film, actually trying to cooperate with owners, found ways. There's a mechanism called empty dwelling management orders as well, where we can actually, and we're on the point of being able to achieve that with one property in Nottingham, actually put a tenant in, and that broadly might be helping an owner out in a situation where they didn't quite know where to go. Often these things get tied up with things like probate and all sorts. Yeah. We're trying to get that sort of supportive, cooperative side of the work going as well.
Just very briefly, is it all about, if you like, regenerating housing? But it's also about the image of a city, isn't it? Because as we saw in Derby, it looks so bad when you see boarded up buildings.
Yes, I don't think there's an example in Nottingham where we get whole blocks like that. But it's still a scattered problem across all kinds of areas, right to buy houses or council estates, owner-occupied areas as well, and some private landlords.